Today I'm going to be sharing with you how to stitch a Colorblock fanny pack. This is using the pattern that I have for sale on my Etsy shop. It's Atelier Joy. I'll have the link to the shop and the pattern in the description below. You begin by cutting out your main fabric, lining and interfacing, and then apply the interfacing to the main fabric pieces. You'll also need a 14-inch zipper, 1 yard of strapping, a buckle, and a tri-glide. Cut your strapping into 2 pieces, 9-inch and 27-inch. And then apply fray check to all ends of straps to prevent fraying. So for this project, I recommend using a 14-inch long zipper, and the pattern comes with a template for marking on your zipper. There are a series of marks that you will need to put on in order to match your zipper up with the seams in the body of the bag. So the first thing you're going to do is take your zipper, match up the ends to find your center point, and mark that center point. That's kind of your anchor. I'm just using a tailor's chalk here. You can use a pencil or anything else that'll wash out. Okay, so now I've got my center point. Now I can lay the template down with the center matched up, and I'm going to make marks on those other triangles. The first seam that we're going to sew is between this middle piece and the mid-side sections, and I have all of my my main body pieces interfaced already, as you can see. So we're just going to match up the notches here and pin and sew. Now, we have a convex curve here. So in order to make this lie really nicely, I'm going to clip out along the seam. Close to the seam allowance without snipping into it. Okay, I'm going to use a tailor's ham since this is a curved seam. And first you can finger press this open like that. And then get that iron in there. Got this nice curved piece. As we go along, I'm going to be trimming my seam allowance to about 1/4 of an inch just to reduce the bulk inside the bag. So just trim about half of this seam allowance off. Okay, next we're going to be applying the zipper to this portion of the bag. So you want to get your zipper, and where you've marked your center point from the template, that's where you're going to match up with the center notch on that middle portion of the bag. I've got my zipper set up with the pull on when I'm looking at it right now, on the right side. If you're left-handed, you might want to have it reversed. So with the pull on this side. Okay. So find your center notch. Find your center marking on your zipper, and you want to match those up. Then your next marking on the zipper is going to match up with this seam right here where these two pieces connect. Make sure when you're pinning that you pin this seam allowance open. And that last marking that you marked will line up with this notch here. Same for the other side. All right, now we're gonna take it to the machine and stitch this up with your zipper foot. I've got my zipper pinned. As you can see, the zipper is face down. Now I'm going to stitch it. I've got my zipper foot installed on my machine. And I'm gonna be stitching about 1/8 of an inch away from this raw edge. Should be right in the middle of the section that's next to the actual zipper part. Okay, now we're gonna switch gears. This bag is fully lined. So the next step that we need to do is actually go to your lining and find your middle section and your mid-side sections and pin them together just like we did with the main body. I matched up the notches, and now I'm gonna sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Oh, gotta switch back to my regular foot. All right. All right, I've got my lining front piece, seam allowances clipped and trimmed and pressed. Now I'm going to apply this here. You're going to have right sides facing each other. So my right side of my lining is facing my right side of the body. And we're going to be stitching the lining to the zipper. So you're going to match up your center notch on the lining with the center notch from the body. Match up these seams. There's a lot of material here. That's why you want to keep those seam allowances trimmed as much as possible. So you've got your lining, then the zipper, then the main body, okay? And we're gonna stitch this. I'm probably just going to stitch right over that seam that I already made. Or if you want to, you can stitch on this side and just keep the same seam allowance. Okay, I'm back at the machine. I've switched back to my zipper foot. And as I said, I'm just going to follow right over the stitches that I used to stitch the main body to the zipper. We've got our main body on the outside, our lining on the inside. Now I'm going to take this to the iron. and press everything away from the zipper. You want to make sure that you're pressing it well away from the zipper so that when you're using the zipper, it doesn't get caught in any fabric. And you want to make sure that you're pressing the main body and the lining well away from the zipper. All right. And to keep everything where it's supposed to be, we're gonna top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge there. We've got our top stitching. I chose to just stay with my white thread. Since this is a color blocked style, you can have a lot of fun with this stitching. You could match it to your zipper, you could match it to the strapping that you're gonna use. It's just another fun detail that you can play around with. I have a white strapping, so I figure that the white thread will go nicely with it too. The next step is applying the body top to the zipper. And on this body top, there are several notches that are important. You've got your center notch on this curve. There's one here, and then there's one near the edge. And those are gonna line up with the markings that you marked on your zipper. So you're gonna pin the top, right side applying to the right side of the zipper. I'm going to match up the notches like I mentioned and then go back and pin in between as needed. So since it is a curve, if you're a little nervous about stitching this on the machine, you can go ahead and hand baste this and then stitch it on the machine. That way you can be sure to get the curve right. All right, but I'm gonna try to just stitch this straight away at the machine. Clip the excess fabric from your seam allowance along the curve. Okay, next we're gonna apply our lining top to the zipper. So you're gonna take this curved section and you're going to match it with the markings on your zipper. So I've got my center, and find my center on the zipper there. I'm ready to stitch my top lining onto the zipper. I've got it all pinned. Like I did with the bottom part and the lining, I'm going to actually just stitch right over where I stitched the main part to the zipper. I'm just going to follow that same stitch line. So I've got my body top, zipper in between, lining on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and clip this seam allowance on the lining like I did with the main body, and then I'm going to turn it out and press the top body and the top lining away from the zipper, and then I'll top stitch it in place. My regular presser foot, and I'm gonna open up this zipper so I think it'll be easier for me to sew it. Check out your zipper, make sure it works. There we go. All right. So unfortunately, I thought I was recording that last bit and I wasn't, so I'll just tell you what I did. We're gonna be stitching fabric to this part of the bag next. So to do that, we need to move the zipper into the body of the bag and away from that seam. So pull your zipper over here, and then you're going to, using your scissors, chop off that zipper right where it meets up with the raw edge of the fabric on the sides. And then using a pin or a clip like this, hold it in place, take it to your machine. And I did a couple of rows forward and back stitching just to hold my seam in place there. We also need to trim off this end of the zipper. This is a little bit easier. You're just going to trim it off to match up with the raw edge of the fabric. The one thing you want to be careful of is not to pull your zipper pull all the way to the end, because we're going to be cutting off our stop here. And if you pull the zipper pull all the way to the end before we stitch this seam, the zipper will just fall apart. So I'm going to trim this. Okay, we're ready to attach our side pieces now. So I've got one side pinned. The most important part is to match the notches that are down here. Okay, I'm going to pin this other side. So I've got my notch here, matching it up with this notch here. And that way down here where this intersects, that's going to be where our seam allowance hits. Okay, so we've got these side seams done. You're going to actually take your lining pieces here and pin them onto here and stitch here. Press the side main and lining pieces away from the mid side, and then top stitch the side pieces just outside the seam. We're now going to stitch the interior pocket that goes on the back part of the lining. Fold the pocket with right sides together, matching up their notches, and pin in place. Stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, leaving the space between the notches open for turning. Clip your corners, trim the side seam allowances, but leave the bottom intact. Turn it right side out, using your scissors to push the corners out. On the side without the opening, top stitch 3/4 inch from the top. Then place your pocket top corners between the markings on your lining back piece. Pin in place. And top stitch 1/8 inch from the edge, just along the sides and the bottom, leaving the top open. Pin your strapping between the notches on the side pieces. If the wearer is right-handed, you'll want to attach the short piece to the left side if the fanny pack is facing you. And the long piece will go on the right-hand side if the fanny pack is facing you. Switch that around if the wearer is left-handed. Stitch the strapping with a scant 1/2 inch seam allowance. You're now attaching the back. As you can see, I've just pinned the strapping out of the way. Open up the zipper to the middle of the bag so that you can turn the bag right side out after stitching. Matching up the notches, you'll pin your back to the front, right sides together. Stitch all the way around the bag with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You don't need to leave an opening because you'll be turning the bag through the zipper. Open up your zipper, turn it right side out to make sure everything looks okay. If everything's okay, you turn the bag wrong side out again to apply the back lining piece. Close your zipper and press the bulk of the body down towards the middle of the bag. Lay the back lining onto the front lining, right sides together. Pin in place. Leaving about a 3-inch opening at the bottom of the bag for turning, you'll stitch around the bag with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Check to make sure everything looks okay. So first, turn your lining right side out. Then open your zipper and turn the whole bag right side out. Make sure your strapping hasn't gotten caught in anything. Make sure that your zipper works, that there's no stitching issues that need to be fixed. And if everything's okay, then you're going to turn the bag back inside out and then turn the lining inside out. Clip your corners and your curves, trim the seam allowances to reduce bulk, but do not trim the area where you left the 3-inch opening at the bottom. Leave that intact. Again, turn your lining right side out. And at the 3-inch opening that you left, fold in the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Tuck in any loose threads. Pin in place, matching up that fold to the seam line where you stitched the lining, and you're going to slip stitch that 3-inch opening closed by hand. Turn your bag right side out. You're almost done. We're just going to press the bag to make sure it looks nice and clean and attach the hardware. Press the bag. Use a seam roll or tailor's ham as needed. Now we're going to be attaching the hardware. Feed your short strap through the pronged side of the buckle and pin in place with about a 3/4 inch overlap. For the long strap, feed it through the tri-glide. Then feed it through the other side of the buckle. Now you're going to loosen the strap as it went through the tri-glide and feed the end back through the tri-glide. And again, pin in place with a 3/4 inch overlap. I like to hand stitch the ends of the strapping in place using a combination of back stitches and whip stitches. But if you want to try to sew it on your machine, you can. Sometimes the bulk of the buckle can get in the way. That's why I prefer doing it by hand. Congratulations! You've finished your fanny pack. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please like and subscribe, and check out my Atelier Joy Etsy shop for this pattern and other patterns. You can find the link to the pattern and the Etsy shop in the description below. Thanks for watching.